You've likely heard the idea of quantum consciousness. The very term may even set off alarm bells indicating what follows may be unscientific, wishful thinking. And it's true the cart may have come before the horse here, but it's easy to see why. Reducing consciousness to purely biochemical processes of the brain, as many scientists propose, completely eliminates the possibility of free will. Consciousness is a mere illusion. But we clearly experience consciousness. This scientific reductionism completely contradicts our lived experience. Modern philosophers like Deepak Chopra picked up on this and looked to the strangeness of the quantum world in an attempt to give our shared experience some scientific backing. But his ideas, although very interesting, do not hold up to scientific scrutiny. Others, with more scientific chops, have also tried. Most notably, perhaps the greatest living physicist today, Sir Roger Penrose. His belief in the quantum mind comes from a philosophical start as well. He believes that the mind cannot just be computationally based. He points to Gödel's incompleteness theorems, which describe the fundamental shortcomings of formal, logical systems. Human intelligence, as Penrose proposes, is more than that. He introduced his concept of the quantum mind in 1989, but even with the prestigious reputation of Penrose behind this idea, his peers dismissed the theory, accusing him of pursuing what he wants to believe rather than the truth. After all, in order for us to observe effects like quantum entanglement in a lab, we need to cool everything down near absolute zero and keep everything extremely isolated. This is the main challenge of quantum computing. The human brain is the exact opposite environment. But in the last 5 years, a breakthrough has been made. Not only have there been successful scientific studies showing quantum effects influencing the mind, but physicist Matthew Fisher has proposed a realistic mechanism for it. And unlike Chopra and Penrose's prior efforts, this one is gaining steam. Anesthetic substances are able to dial conscious levels all the way to zero and back. An extremely valuable tool in examining the nature of consciousness. But although we have a very good handle on the effects and safe administration of anesthesia, we still don't know the mechanism through which it works. This is all the more stark when examining the simplest, safest, and most effective anesthetic, xenon. Like me, you probably weren't even aware that this element had anesthetic properties. It's too expensive to be used in clinical applications. But it's amazing for scientific study. It's as simple as it gets, a single element. You'd think we'd be able to figure out how it works. But alas, no. But we're not without clues. The base unit for chemistry is the atom. We categorize atoms into elements, like xenon. But if we drill deeper, we know that not all xenon atoms are identical. They all have 54 protons, but they can have a different amount of neutrons within their core. We call these different isotopes of xenon. Different isotopes of an element behave identically in chemical reactions, but the slight nuclear differences do have effects at the quantum level. The most commonly known difference between isotopes is radioactivity. Having too many or too few neutrons can make the nucleus unstable. The different nuclear arrangements also influence quantum properties like nuclear spin. All isotopes of xenon are stable, but some have nuclear spin, while others lack the quantum rotation. Nuclear spin only comes into play when you're looking at the quantum scale. In broader chemical or biochemical processes, these minutiae can be ignored. So, if the critics of Penrose and quantum mind theories are correct, each isotope of xenon should affect the body in the exact same fashion. The quantum spin differences shouldn't have an effect on our consciousness, as we aren't a quantum system. But this is not what experimental results show. The isotopes of xenon which do not have a nuclear spin are more potent than isotopes of xenon that have a nuclear spin. The conclusion of this 2018 paper in the Anesthesiology Journal is that the lower anesthetic potency of the isotope xenon-129 may be the result of its participating in conscious processing and therefore partially antagonizing its own anesthetic potency. And this is not the only study showing that our consciousness is somehow perceptive to quantum spins. Similar studies with different isotopes of the elemental antidepressive drug lithium show similar results. Isotopes with differing quantum spin affect people's mood quite differently. Even more, there's recent studies showing that both our sense of smell and our sense of taste are influenced by quantum spin. It seems clear that somehow, despite not being a cold, isolated environment, our consciousness is affected by quantum phenomena. But how? And what does that mean? At a very high level, Penrose's Oak-OR theory amounts to saying there are areas of the brain that have incredibly small structure, small enough that the effects of quantum phenomena may perhaps prevail. But Penrose doesn't fill in the key details on how exactly quantum effects like entanglement could last long enough to have any measurable effect in the hot, messy environment of the brain. Matthew Fisher has picked up this slack. Fisher is a world-renowned theoretical physicist who has spent the last 30 years doing cutting-edge research into quantum phenomena as a professor and as a research physicist at top technology companies. For the last 8 years, Fisher has been obsessed with figuring out the quantum nature of the mind. If our consciousness actually is based on quantum computation, such a unit, a qubit, must be able to maintain its spin long enough to entangle with other qubits and process information. This is where Fisher started. There are many types of nuclear spin, but only one type can survive a watery environment. And there are a handful of elements closely associated with life, and of them, only one has this type of spin: phosphorus. Fisher continued pulling on this phosphorus thread with amazing results. When energy is used by cells in your body, which happens literally all over and all the time, phosphorus pairs are separated as the energy molecules are burned. This process entangles the quantum spin of the two phosphorus atoms. This entanglement will only last a number of seconds unless there happens to be an availability of calcium ions nearby, in which case the calcium binds to the phosphate ions, forming what are called Posner molecules. These molecules are found in small amounts in our vital fluids, and more predominantly, they make up the majority of our bones. These molecules also allow the quantum spin of the phosphorus atom to last an astonishingly long time, potentially years or decades. But it doesn't stop there. Calcium ions are the major signaling unit used in the brain's normal biochemical functioning. For a Posner molecule floating around in there, the chance it will deteriorate into its constituent phosphate and calcium ions is influenced by the particles it is entangled with. Thus, the network of phosphoric entanglement within your bones may literally influence what goes on in your brain. Our bodies may really be quantum computers. Fisher ends his theory here, making a convincing case that there is a biological capability for quantum processing in the body influencing our brain's function. But it's easy to take it one step further. Mother's intuition might actually be based on a quantum link between mother and child, with linked Posner molecules created during gestation getting separated between mother and fetus. The often cited supernatural link between twins may also stem from pairs of maternal Posner molecules shared between the two. It's also interesting to note that our bones are constantly regenerating, cycling material completely in about 10 years. This new material comes from our food supply. Some of this food, milk, meat, and leafy vegetables, are high in potentially quantumly entangled Posner molecules, created as the animal or plant used energy. These molecules may end up locked into your bones, original spin intact. If one shares meals with another for a decade or more, there's a high probability that there's some overlap in your quantum computational networks. This could be the mechanism for telepathic communication. If this theory is correct, it might even explain the epidemic of loneliness and isolation our generation faces. In previous generations, families and villages would eat from the same trees. They'd slaughter an animal and would all eat from the same bean. In these communal settings, the paired Posner molecules within the local food supply would be spread amongst the community, forming a quantum bond, establishing some degree of shared consciousness within the community. Nowadays, as we eat food from far away, 2 apples on a table may have been plucked from trees miles away from each other. Milk and ground beef come from countless numbers of source animals. It's rare to have 2 plates on the same table containing paired Posner molecules. This quantum connection to those closest to us has almost certainly been diminished. I would love to see scientific studies investigating this. The food substance with the highest amount of Posner molecules is milk. This makes sense. The bond between mother and child is one of the most important in nature. As the child's bones grow, it makes sense there'd be a mechanism to keep building the links forged during gestation. And if this theory is correct, perhaps the easiest way to test this would be sourcing cow's milk from a single cow and giving the sourced milk to a group of strangers over time. Each glass of milk would contain millions of Posner molecules, each one entangled with a molecule in a different glass of milk. Once these paired molecules are distributed amongst the strangers, there may be some degree of shared consciousness that was not there before. Show stranger A an extremely gut-wrenching movie, and stranger B might feel extremely sad. They may even say something like, "I feel it in my bones." I'd like to know your thoughts here. Does this sound like a plausible explanation for consciousness and ESP? Have you had any ESP experiences? And if so, was it with a biological relation or someone you shared meals with over years? And a big thanks to Andy, @Joke2Self on Twitter, for tipping me off to this phosphorus consciousness connection. I really appreciate you sharing this. In my previous video, I explored the connection between phosphorus and UFO hotspots, in particular Skinwalker Ranch. I feel there must be some link between phosphate deposits, unknown aerial phenomenon, and consciousness, but I'm still trying to figure out a potential pathway for that. Perhaps someday we can all eat fruit from the same tree and share ideas telepathically. But for now, please leave me your thoughts in the comments below. And thanks for watching Rather Be Squidding. Be sure to subscribe, as I'll continue to bring you reports on the and underknown.